Yeah. So would you be able to tell us a little bit about your family background and how you first got into baseball?
Okay, well, I'm from Hawaii, obviously a third generation Japanese American. Baseball in Hawaii, I believe, was brought in from Japan to the kids of I don't know what generation, probably the first or second generation. And so we had leagues and stuff that got us started. Mostly they were Japanese only, and so that's kind of how I got, some background on it. Started playing little league and stuff like that, and all the same things that kids do: youth league, high school, and then went on to college. And fortunately, helped me progress to the highest level. I think that was where I really found the love of the game was from just playing it as a really small kid.
Can you tell us a little bit about the baseball culture as you were growing up, and especially in Hawaii? It seems like the baseball culture is very different from in the mainland. Would love to hear more about how that intersected with your life and how baseball was played and the communities in
Mhm.
your local areas.
Well, I think it's probably from the history of the islands. Most of the immigrants were brought here to work on the plantation, and so what the plantation work owner would do is try to, incorporate some sports so that people would get along better because there was a language barrier, and obviously, this guy named Hans Lorange, I guess, used to run the Waipahu one. He started a league where each ethnicity had his own team. So they would play baseball and basketball and things like that. But baseball was a common denominator. It really brought everybody together, and then transferred itself into the mainstream community once plantation days were over, and so it was a big bonding thing. And then of course we got a professional team in 1961, so that the meeting ground for everybody for baseball was to go to Honolulu Stadium and watch the Hawaii Islanders play, which was a Pacific Coast League team. And it's kind of like how I got, the knowledge of there is professional baseball. And on occasion, there would be players that had with backgrounds, from Hawaii and minority stuff, and they, gave us kind of the motivation and incentive to think about possibly going further than just playing locally, just high school. So that's kind of how it got started with me and Ryan Kurosaki and a whole bunch of us that got into mainstream or big time baseball.
It seemed like sort of local baseball in Hawaii. There are different teams that were formed around ethnic groups. Is that correct? You had a
Yeah,
Japanese.
that would be the plantation days, and then still to this day, the AJA, which is Americans of Japanese ancestry, still perpetuate the league, which started probably post World War II, I believe. And so you had to have Japanese blood, at least a drop of it, to play in the league, and that's kind of like that culture of. But this whole thing, like if you look at Little League baseball today, it's dominated kind of with Hawaiian baseball teams, at that age group, 11, 12, or maybe it goes to 13 now. And so, it's a mixture of everybody, and kind of like through the years, I mean, we used to call dogs that had, a blend of breeds, we used to call them poi dogs. And poi dogs are kind of like everybody now. We're all the same. We're just Hawaiians. We're not really like we're all only Japanese or only Chinese or whatever. It's like the thing has become really international thing, and we're very proud of everybody that comes from Hawaii that goes on to become on a national scale. I know that well, I still work for the Giants, but we have a Hawaiian-born player named Maui Ahuna, and he's from the Big Island. And the interest of him to me is because the Giants have never really drafted Hawaiian players for whatever reason. So the interest there, and that common bond is very important to a lot of us.
Yeah, could you tell us a little bit about what it was like to play in high school and then how you made the transition from high school baseball to playing college?
Well, I'm from the '70s, and so that era was a lot different because we didn't have a lot of distraction. So, athletics for men was a big part of our lives. And so high school baseball is huge because our representation of the school is important to us. And so to make a team, varsity team it was cool. It was like, you're a big man on campus kind of thing. And, that part is why, it was attractive to do anything like that. And, to go on and play in a state tournament, things like that were a big goal. And that's kind of what attracted us all to, becoming athletes. I don't think we were going to go on to high school. Most of us at that time were thinking about, how we could get good jobs. And so some of it that's why we went to college, but it was not really to, to get a scholarship. I think a lot of it was because we were so isolated from the mainland that nobody really thought anything was going on here except hula dancing and luau's. So it was a lot different.
Is it true that you were classmates and teammates with Ryan Kurosaki in high school? This is in Honolulu, right?
Yes, we're the east end of Honolulu. He was a year older than I. He graduated in '70. I graduated in '71. But our 1970 baseball team was state champions. We were all-age champions, city champions, and state champions, and were considered at that time one of the best teams ever to be state champions in Hawaii. So. Obviously, Ryan was the first Japanese American to play in the National League, and I was the first to play in the American League. So that was a big deal, even though we always thought that we were baseball players first and not ambassadors of our culture or ethnicity. So, but I can see where some people thought that was a big deal because we were the next generation after our fathers, the ones that fought in World War II.
And your transition to Gonzaga, can you tell us how that happened?
Well, I had to go to a junior college first, and we do not have a junior college sports system still to this day. Our community colleges do not have, the money to do that. So a lot of us, if we were, wanted to go away to school, we had to pick places that sometimes, were not that pretty. I went to a community college in eastern side of Oregon called Treasure Valley Community College, which was in the middle of nowhere. I think the total population of this town, the city, was maybe 10,000. And it was a farming community. And I got my start there. And fortunately enough, because of exposure, somebody saw me. A San Francisco Giant scout wanted to sign me, which is why I went there. I didn't like his offer because it was a whopping $2,500. So my scholarship to Gonzaga was worth more than that. So I opted to go to Gonzaga. I had choices to go to Nebraska, which is where Ryan was, but he told me not to come because of the weather, and the football was the biggest part of that program, not baseball at that time. And then there was Washington State, who offered me a full scholarship as well, but I heard too many bad things about the program, so I chose Gonzaga and went there 2.5 years.
So then from college, what led you to play in the pros?
Well, the opportunity to sign, because I was drafted 3 times. And so I had set a goal to go out when I was ready, which was probably going to be after my junior year. But back then, they had another draft, which was in January, and that was usually for junior college players and seniors, people over 21. So because I didn't get what I wanted, I waited till I was a senior. I wasn't a big student, probably obvious. School was there only for pass the time, kind of, and just stay eligible to play baseball. And my initial reason to go away to school was to become a coach. So I was going to be like a PE teacher and a coach, and then, try to contribute that way. But then when I got drafted by the Giants as a freshman, I changed my goal plan because I go, oh, I guess I can play pro ball. I'm good enough. And so from that point, I just threw myself totally into trying to get into professional baseball. And I didn't do it the right way. I actually was in school for my senior season, and I just dropped out and I signed the contract, and it caused a big controversy because I had to drop out of school, and my coach at that time was very, very upset about it. So he wrote an article, or not wrote an article, but he spread a contaminating thing about how bad professional baseball was. And so at that time it was kind of ugly, but I had no choice. They told me after they gave me the contract and I signed it that the only choice I had was either to play for the Milwaukee Brewers or just sit out and, can't play college baseball either because they considered me a pro already. So I don't know if that confuses you, but at that time I did not think correctly, and that's the way it works out.
So it's not quite Nebraska, but it's still Wisconsin.
Yeah, and the thing was, they didn't even know who I was. Because after I signed the contract, I called them to try to get out of it. And the general manager of the team, this guy named Jim Bauer, Jim Baumer, he had no idea who I was. He had to turn me over to the minor league farm department to deal with it. So I pretty much knew probably wasn't in the right organization because they were a cheap organization at that time.
But it was at the Brewers where you actually marked your debut. And
right.
I'm looking at the records here. Your first game was on July 21st, 1977.
Mm-hmm.
And then you hit your first home run on July 25th against the Orioles. Do you remember that moment for your first game and your first home run?
Well, the first game part I was totally naive about, what it would be like to be a major leaguer. I did not have a sport jacket or anything, that was considered, classy. I went up basically, took a flight from Phoenix where we were playing in the minor leagues, flew into New York, didn't know I had to pick up my luggage and all that. I had no idea what I was doing. I take a cab to the hotel and I run into the equipment manager. He says, "Well, where's your stuff?" I said, "Oh, it's probably back at the airport, so you had to go pick it up." I get in there, we open up in Yankee Stadium, and I have no idea what's going on. I walk in, I see the field itself, and then it hit me. This is the major leagues. I'm playing in Yankee Stadium where Babe Ruth played and Lou Gehrig, and then I suddenly got kind of nervous, and that time the Yankees were just building a team that had some stars, like Reggie Jackson was playing at that time, and Catfish Hunter, another Hall of Famer, is gone, but that was the opening day pitcher, or my opening day pitcher. So that whole thing, the reality of that was mind-boggling because you grow up watching these guys on TV, then all of a sudden you have to compete, and that kind of was eerie. So that's my first experience of that. And, the home run was against an Oriole pitcher, Dennis Martinez, who was really good. But I was totally unaware of what Major League Baseball was supposed to be like or how to deal with it. And I think it's kind of why I went into coaching, is because I wanted to actually help players that I touched at some point in their careers, which usually was A-ball, to understand what it's like to be a professional player.
A few years later, in 1983, we know that your team won the World Series. Can you tell us a little bit about how and why you think the team was so successful that year?
Well, some of it is just good fortune. I think that when it's your time, because to win, most of your players have to have good seasons. Now, we had good pitching, which is what carried us, and we had, players like Cal Ripken Jr. and Eddie Murray, who were, the big clutch guys in the middle of the lineup. But everybody contributed to the point where we were always in every game. We never beat ourselves, and usually the last part of the game we considered our part of the game, the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning. And I can remember Cal Ripken Sr. would always say that if we were behind by a run or two, he'd always say out loud, "This is our part of the game," which told us, okay, it's time to bear down, and and pitchers don't walk anybody, defenders make the plays, and we scored runs to come back and win. So the entire season was kind of like if you call it lucky, it's Jim Palmer got hurt, and they called up Mike Boddicker, who was not really a major league prospect, but he was the best available, and he came up and won 16 games in the second half, I think, which is, if he doesn't do that, we don't get in. And there are other guys that came up and took the place of like Tippy Martinez, who had an appendectomy and missed like a month, and they actually strengthened the staff, the guys we called up. So it was sometimes people call it luck, sometimes it looks like that. But to win, everybody has to play well. You don't win unless the whole team is contributing.
Well, it seemed like you had great teammates with you. Could we hear a little bit about what it was like to play with Cal Ripken Jr., the Iron Man?
Well, he was a professional. Back then we had to take infield every day, which is the pregame practice. And today they don't even take infield. It's not required. But he made every infield, and he didn't miss one. Not to mention, of course, the obvious, he didn't miss any games. But he was a nice kid because younger than me, and very professional because he grew up in baseball because of his father's influence. Eddie Murray was a good teammate too because he's a very encouraging guy. Even Jim Palmer, who a lot of people considered kind of a stuck-up guy, to me was one of my best teammates I've ever had. So I would say the whole thing is a blending of and dismissing of the egos for the one common goal, which was to win. I think that separated the Orioles from any team I ever played on, because you don't find that every day, and I don't know how it was developed. Probably because that's the kind of players they wanted. And I think Earl, when he was the manager, would not put up with any egotists. And then Altobelli, who took over and we won with him, was of the same nature. So I think that's created by one, acquiring that kind of player and not putting up with that kind of ego. Where I see today through coaching and all that, some of it is like they think that's the way to act. So that would be the common denominator. The thing that stuck out the most was the fact that all of us wanted the same thing. We all wanted to win.
So could you tell us a little bit about that game on August 24th, 1983, where you played catcher? I think Tippy Martinez picked 3 runners on first base in 1 inning. There was the walk-off home run on the bottom of the 10th.
Well, that's one of the things I think I'm remembered by, with the Orioles. But I was kind of like the bullpen catcher, which meant I had to go down there because we only had 2 catchers to help warm up pitchers that were coming in the game. And so that was my only practice or experience really past Little League that I had as a catcher. So I didn't predict or didn't want to catch. I didn't expect to catch. And sometimes I was hopeful I wouldn't go in the game as a catcher. But there were 2 events or 2 games that happened where I might have caught, but we never tied the game, and so we didn't go extra innings. Well, this one we did, and so as I was used as a pinch runner for a catcher, I think I pinch ran for Joe Nolan. I scored the tying run, and now the manager, Joe Altobelli, tells me, "Hey, you're catching," and so I couldn't say no, so I had to now go into the clubhouse and find catcher's gear, a glove, and I'm asking all that, and then go out there. So I found it, all the stuff I borrowed, like Rick Dempsey was the starting catcher. I borrowed his glove. I borrowed him, just put on a mask, found that, shin guards, all that stuff, chest protector. And then I was going out to my position behind home plate. All I was thinking about was, I hope I don't embarrass myself and miss balls and have to go chase them, by the backstop. And that's really what I remember the most. And everything else was so surreal because it wasn't like I was really even playing. It just felt like I was just on the field. And the one thing I remember was the first pitcher was this guy, Tim Stoddard, who was really big, 6 foot, I think 6'6" or 6'7" pitcher. So he throws the first pitch to Cliff Johnson, who's pinch hitting. And he hits this ball that goes way over left field. And the sound was so loud that it was almost like a firecracker went off in my ear. And then I watched the ball go flying over the fence. And the first thing I thought of was, well, at least I don't have to catch anymore after this thing. And then the next guy gets a hit, Barry Bonnell. So he's on first. I go out to talk to Tim. I say, Tim, I'm not giving you any location. I'm only giving you the pitch. It would help if I give you the location. He goes, don't worry, they're taking me out. So I looked at the dugout, and here come El Tabelli. After 2 pitches to take him out of the game, and then Tippy came in and picked everybody off, and then I hit a home run, and that was the end of the dream. So that was the experience itself. So it still doesn't seem real.
Well, how did Tippy Martinez pick 3, runners in a row? I mean, that seems pretty crazy as you think about
it. I think it was because they knew I wasn't a catcher. See, Toronto knew, one, that when I threw the ball down the second to end the inning, to start the inning, I think I bounced it like twice. So they're already thinking, like, if they get on, they're going to run. And Tippy did not really have a good move, but they were so anxious to steal that this was funny that Dave Collins was playing, and he was a switch hitter, and Tippy's left-handed. He's supposed to bat right-handed. He went up left-handed, so I couldn't see the runner. Like, I'm thinking, I'm not that good. You don't have to do that. And so that the whole obvious reason they were trying to steal. That's why they got picked off. And the fact that they all got on. So I don't know if that was his pitching, or I don't think it was purposeful that he was putting them on. But I think I caught 12 pitches or 11 pitches. The rest were either hit or then he picked them off. So then he went by fast, and obviously it ended correctly. And the next night we walked them off again. And so they came into town. We were like floundering, like in 3rd place or whatever. But those 2 walk-off losses put them in such a mindset that they never recovered. We went flying by them after that and came in first.
Well, the on the game you caught that you hit the home run in the 10th inning, do you remember that moment? Was it all adrenaline at that point?
No, I wouldn't even say it was adrenaline. It was more like relief. I think that when I was walking to the plate to hit, I wasn't really that nervous. My legs were shaking because of fatigue. So the only thing I'm thinking is, I don't want to catch anymore. Okay, so I got to catch one more inning. I'm probably going to get hurt, fall down, or make an ass out of myself. So when I went up, I just was trying to make contact, and it just happened the pitcher hung a slider good enough that I could get the ball in the barrel of the bat and take it out of left field, and that's what happened. So it's kind of like a mindless thing, but that's how baseball works. So you're better off when you don't think. And I think the problem with today's baseball, which I'm still active in with the Giants, is there's too much interference from, analytical stuff that has no bearing on the game itself in terms of playing, because you're supposed to be athletic to play. This is not a mathematical question, or equation that you solve that's going to make you a better player. It's just not. So that part, I think we were good at analyzing problems and fixing them ourselves. We didn't really have coaches that were that effective, not to be critical, but that's my experience in, baseball in the 70s and 80s.
Well, speaking of the 70s and 80s, you were playing at a time when there were very few Asian American ball players. And I'm also thinking, in addition to Ryan Kurosaki, I mean, earlier you had Mashi Murakami in the 1960s in the Giants, but very few others seem to have broken into the major leagues. So can you tell us what it felt like to play the game in a time when there were very few people of Asian descent?
Well, that was a time where Asians were not considered, we're kind of invisible in the world of, sports. And even generally speaking, we were more thought of as probably academic people, or, maybe dentists, restaurant owners, stuff like that. And so when it came to athletics, I mean, going to college, I don't think I played on any team against any team in California that had an Asian American playing. So the oddity of like maybe what you're always self-conscious. I was about what people thought of me, and I'm sure they probably looked at me like I was a freak, but the whole thing about playing in America in my mind, and I'm sure Ryan's mind, was that we were trying to find out how good we were. So to us, it was just competing, and we didn't see a color barrier or anything like that. We were Americans, and yeah, maybe it was a little bit difficult to blend in, but that's a chance we took. I mean, we knew why we left Hawaii. We wanted to see what we were about. So that to me was why we did it.
Did you feel like there was a strong following amongst the Asian American community, or folks back in Hawaii?
I suppose so, but I didn't really go back. After the off season, I moved from Hawaii to California, and so that part, only short visitations and stuff. I'm sure my friends are glad to see me, but we never talked about, why I was doing what I was doing or how it was. I mean, they just happy to see me. I don't know how Ryan felt about it, but we were just trying to play baseball, and that was all we were doing. It wasn't about anything else.
So after you were playing in the majors, I know you transitioned to be a coach in Japan. And so we're wondering if you could talk a little bit about how that transition happened and what kind of your first impressions were of the kind of difference in baseball.
Okay, that's a good question. I think what most people don't realize, especially like Japanese Americans, is the Japanese don't consider us Japanese. We're like Americans only. I can remember not being able to speak it at all or very well. That I realized after a while it's better I couldn't speak it, because I wouldn't know what they were talking about. So I wouldn't get offended by some of the stuff I'm pretty sure they were saying about me. And it's difficult to tell you, how it felt, but it was almost like I was so out of place. I was neither a Japanese national and I was neither an American. That's how it felt sometimes. So I was in limbo, but because baseball was a common ground, I always looked at it as like how I could get these players better and all that. That was the goal of going over there. And so that experience, I'm kind of going off the question line maybe, but what I'm feeling is that the reason I went obviously is monetary, but I also wanted to see what Japanese baseball is like, because I didn't play it over there, as a professional or as anything. And so that experience was good because they think differently. I know my interpreter told me that there are American words that he could not translate into Japanese. There were no words for that. So he had to find a way to get the philosophy of what I said. So a lot of times there was confusion, between me and the coaches, and I would get upset at him, but he says it's not possible to get on the same wavelength sometimes. So you had to just be patient. And see, I went twice. I went in the 90s and then was asked to go back again 10 years later. And actually, the same kids were playing, or guys, men now, and they had the same coaches. So going back the second time was a lot easier because these guys already knew what I was about, and what I thought. So the second stint was a lot better than the first stint. And I hope I answered the question, but you can ask another one if you want.
Yeah. So, what did you think of Japanese baseball, like the game? Was it similar or different from the major leagues? Did you feel any sense of like at home with how it was played, or was it much more different? Would you be able to speak a little bit on that, maybe?
That's a good one. It was different because the rules are the same. It's just how they applied them. The umpires didn't call certain things. So it made base stealing very difficult because they did not stop the pitcher from balking. And so you had to think of how to, do your offensive scheme. Well, over there, they like to bunt, or they did. And so entirely what they did was play around the bunt. So if the first guy got on, it didn't really matter who the second guy was at that inning, whether he was the fourth or fifth batter. Sometimes that guy had the bunt. And so that part was way different. They always played their defensive players more toward the line than they did in the middle of the field, which was odd at that time because Americans like to play bunched up the middle to take the middle of the field away, and pitchers would pitch to make the guy hit in the middle. There were hardly any fastball counts because their pitchers had 4 or 5 pitches, and so to predict what was coming, which is they did analytics back then, was almost impossible. You just had to, guess right. So those were the differences and kind of how they viewed the game compared to American baseball. Practice was a lot longer and kind of like counterproductive. Facilities there, state of the art for that era. They had field houses with multiple pitching machines inside of them, like the kind with arms, where you just put the balls in the bin and it would shoot the ball at you with an arms machine, and netting so you could hit and take ground balls at the same time. It was, and some of them were just expensive. But they spared no cost when it came to baseball. We had this drill called long tee where the position players would take turns hitting balls out of this baskets, right? So one would toss the ball, the other guy whack, 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 and then they'd take turn. Next guy would do it, whack. We had to go pick up the balls ourselves. I estimated there had to be like 10,000 balls on the field, something like that. It looked like a golf driving range, but they spared no expense. Equipment, anything. It spoiled you because of that. And then of course they fed us every day too, which was great. Like the lunches were awesome. I'm a big soba fan. Soba there is good.
Well, it does sound like a great gig. Can you clarify the first time you went as a part of the coaching staff was in 1995? Is that when Bobby Valentine was taking over as manager of the Chiba Lotte Marines?
Yes, it's 1995 exactly. Bobby and I went together. I think I was a late addition because the man taking over, Hiroka-san, was a great manager, former great player in Japan, and he was given the right or the opportunity to run the Chiba Lotte Marines, who then we were terrible. We were a second division team, there's only 6 teams, but if you're below third, you're pretty much not good. And for 25 years, we were in the second division. So Bobby is asked to go over. And so he's allowed to bring certain people. But one of the things he told Hiroka-san was he needed a minor league manager that, was an American minor league manager. So my name came up and I was hired. And then Bobby hired Tom Robson, who was his hitting coach with Texas. And Bobby was at Texas. He didn't hire Tom House, but Hiroka-san liked Tom House. So Tom House was brought on as an analyst or a part-time pitching coach. So that was the group that went. And we started off having spring training in Arizona. We used the Peoria complex in Phoenix, which was the Padres then, Padres and Mariners. And so for the first part of spring training, which started much earlier than American spring training, January 27th, we were allowed to work. So from that point, like the 28th to 29th, we were in Arizona, and then big league camp for major league teams didn't start till like March 1st. So we had the whole facility to ourselves for like 3 weeks, and then we went back to Japan, had the rest of our spring training in Japan. So the whole process was long, hard, and then getting to know, what Japanese baseball was like was difficult too, because Bobby and I had no clue really. And then it worked out very well for Bobby, but because of that, I think he got fired. I was kept on, but I think most of why we were brought on was we were there to be blamed for when Hiroka-san was going to fire most of the coaches that were on the former staff. And he didn't quite accomplish it. He got fired first. So it was very difficult to understand why and the how or what was going on.
But it seems like you're, the new sort of coaching staff that Bobby assembled and you participated in, it really was a very different way to manage a team and run a team even. It seemed like Bobby was much more into directly talking, to the players and getting feedback from the players. I mean, did you feel like this was very different
Yeah.
compared to other teams?
Well, I mean, you're talking about American teams. Sometimes American managers don't actually present themselves as being, available. I know that in Japan, Bobby, had to use an interpreter, and a lot of times he didn't even know if the interpreter was saying what he was saying, So, but I think the players liked playing for him. I think the way he played with the players he had was good. That's why they were successful. But our two areas were totally different. Mine was totally development. His was trying to win. So I still view that as the right way to do things, in the minor leagues. Now, Major League Baseball is a lot different. And I think Bobby was good at getting his players to play, hard for him and win. So the thing about Bobby is that sometimes he's difficult to understand, but he thinks differently. And at that time, he was way ahead of the curve in terms of how baseball should be played and everything. I mean, he was, to me, I was always interested in what he had to say about anything because he was different than anybody I ever ran across in baseball.
So that's fascinating. While you were in Japan, you had a chance to observe Japanese players, and we're just wondering if there were any players that really left a strong impression of you. For example, we were thinking of Ichiro. You must have had a chance to see him rise to stardom before coming to the majors. Did you take note of him when you were there?
Well, I'd seen him when he was first started playing pro ball. He played in the Hawaiian Winter League, and I think 1994 or 3. And we had a whole bunch of Japanese players in the league. We actually had Taiwanese players too, but we couldn't find an interpreter for them, so they all went back. We had Korean players. All of that, they were on Kauai. And we had a team on Kauai. We had one team on Oahu, one team on Maui, and one team on the Big Island. So all the Japanese players were on the Big Island. And so I can remember our first game was against Hilo, which is the Big Island team. Hilo Stars were the Honolulu Sharks. First pitch of the game to Ichiro, he's leading off for them. He hits a 2-hop ground ball to my second baseman. My second baseman catches the ball, looks to throw, and Ichiro was already safe. And my second baseman, who eventually played in the big leagues, was in shock because he had never seen anybody run that fast. None of us had, because it was a running out of the box swing and speed, coupled with that approach thing. I'd never seen anybody run that fast. I actually timed Ichiro to first base from the bench when he was playing for Oryx. I think he ran 3.7, which is really, really fast. Most guys don't even, especially today, they don't run hard, but most guys don't even get there. Left-handed batters don't even get there in 4 seconds. So superior talent. It stuck out because he had a good arm, and he would always taunt you to run. Like he'd take his time and then he'd throw you out. But his speed and his bat ball contact thing. You could throw a ball almost anywhere and he could reach it. He'd swing at it sometimes, right? Because in Japan, he knew that the fans came to watch him hit. So he instead of walk sometimes, he'd chase a bad pitch, But this guy was, there hasn't ever, maybe never will be a guy like that. So his year's coming up for induction. He's going to be in 2 Hall of Fames with probably the most hits anybody's ever got, period. I'm pretty sure he got like 2,000 in Japan, but unbelievable.
How about one more person in a different league, Hideki Matsui? Did you see him play?
Yeah, we played against him like spring training. He's a big guy. Remember one thing about him, he's like a big bone. He had a big head too. He was just gigantic. I mean, this guy was strong. And actually, Tokyo Dome was not a big park, so he could reach any part of the park, but hit it over the fence. But he's a guy. He was good. He was a different type of player than Ichiro. Ichiro was probably more fun to watch. But Matsui was a good player, good hitter. There's several good players over there. I can't name them all. I mean, we had Hideki Irabu was, to me, I've never seen anything like that, excellent fastball, high velocity, good control. I mean, some of that you just can't teach, but he just got wrapped up in the wrong, I guess, philosophy or wrong way of thinking about playing in America. And I think he got bad advice. So ultimately, it was a bad ending to his thing, but that guy was really impressive too. If I would say anybody was going to make it, I would have picked him over Ichiro.
So you mentioned how you think like analytics is taking over a little bit too much.
Mhm.
What parts of like baseball from like more your time do you think players today need to like draw on?
Well, that's a tough question because we're constantly trying to find the right way, and because baseball to me is individual, teaching, not more than group stuff. That I had an analyst with me in 21, first in San Jose after COVID. I was managing there, and I asked her questions about like what is the hardest hit ball. And she said it's a lower hit ball. A ground ball actually registers higher than a fly ball. So all our players in spring training are going off the computer page area where we have them monitor in to catch their ball flight, exit velocity, right? And so they're doing all that, and they're getting more excited about that when it's really not about hitting. See, the whole thing is like if a low ball is the hardest hit ball, why don't I try to hit a low ball instead of a high ball? So the contradiction of that is my bat path is always going up instead of through. And so what's happening is I'm only controlling one part of the field instead of the whole field maybe, or most of the whole field. And so I don't hit. So the contradiction is I strike out more, but once in a while I hit a home run. But how is that going to help us win? See, the whole thing about development is to produce a winning player. It's just like spinning the ball for a pitcher. What good is spinning the ball rapidly if you don't throw it over the plate? A pitcher, to me, if he's good, will throw and challenge the batter with every pitch in his repertoire. That's fastball, breaking ball, and changeup. And throw it for a strike, and the guy can't hit it. Not to get the batter to chase the ball over his head and on the ground. That's not how the game is played. So if I'm going to evaluate somebody, which I have to, is especially a pitcher, if he doesn't throw strikes and yet batters chase and strike out, he's not going to succeed because eventually they're not going to swing at that. If he throws it knee high, especially if it's on corners, or he can pitch in and not hit the guy and not throw it over the middle of the plate, he'll win. But see, analytics don't, if you're only going by that, this is, how hard you throw or how much your ball spins, eventually it's not going to work. And which is why today we only want pitchers to go 2 or 3 innings, because then they can throw as hard as they can and then they don't get hurt. But then they only pitch once a week, 3 innings. I mean, it's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. And today, I know I'm ranting, but we're getting more injuries. We have more guys on the injured list than we have playing, because they go out and blow out their arm for 1 or 2 innings, and by about the 3rd week, that's it, gone. And it's not going to work. Okay, it's already taken its toll on minor league teams. That's the answer for that, but I don't know if that's exactly the answer you wanted. but that's the way I feel. And I see it from the old days that we wanted to find out who could play every day and who could go 9 innings as a pitcher. And now we're seeing like less activity and more injury. So, which is the right way? I'm pretty sure this is not the right way because teams aren't trying to win either. You know what I mean? Like you see so many teams that lose 100 games now. What are they doing? Why did they even go to spring training? They should have saved money and just went to opening day where they're going to play and not even pay for spring training. So that's my point of view on that.
Yes,
Okay.
that makes a lot. That makes a lot of sense. And then I had one final question, kind of more
Yeah.
general.
Yeah.
If you were to tell yourself something, or your high school self something, what would you tell yourself?
Well, not to quit. I mean, the whole thing about this, Kento, is if you love baseball, I'm pretty sure you do, that nothing's going to stand in your way to achieve the goal you want, which is obviously to play professionally. And so, all your thoughts and all your actions and a lot of your time, I don't want to say most of your time, should be spent trying to figure out a way to get better, whether it's, strength and conditioning, right? Or extra time working on something specific like weaknesses. And the whole thing, Kenta, is not about what's most important. They're all important. Every part of the game is to me big. There are no small things in baseball. So today we have overlooked too much of what it takes to win, which is defense, base running. Focal points really are like power hitting and power pitching. Well, to me, that's like, if you're going to play golf for a living, you want to be a long drive contest player, or you want to be like Masters champion, somebody that plays golf, right? I want to be a golfer. So my attitude toward baseball is the same thing, is that we have to be well-rounded in all aspects of the game, whether it's pitching, it's not just throwing it, that you got to be able to field your position, hold runners from stealing, know situations on how to pitch in the situations that require a ground ball, not just punching people out, right? So, and batters should be able to bunt for a hit and all that. We don't hit and run anymore, but like I said, why is the lower hit ball registering higher on velocity than the higher hit ball? So, it's all that. You have to have a passion, and if you do, and you're willing to put the time in, it'll never be a burden. It'll all be fun.
So we know you're obviously still very involved in the game today, and you've spoken a little bit about this change in focusing on analytics, but given that we now have more and more Asian and Asian American players in the major leagues, what do you think of those players and what they've been able to accomplish so far?
They're doing great. I see a lot of them that are, well, not pure, but you can see the Asian influence in them, like Volpe and who's the other guys? Oh, Higashioka, So, that's I'm seeing because of more, I don't want to say open-mindedness, but the reality that talent is there. It's not what the cover is; it's what's inside. And I see these kids, accepting that and taking advantage of the opportunity to play, right? And I think the drafts are not as big as before in terms of acquiring players. Much less players are coming into the game in America. We're getting most of it, unfortunately, from foreign soil, Latino program. But that bothers me. It is American game and national pastime. Should do more to probably, get more Americans into the game. But the problem is, like, our development program in America is not really helping our players get into that area where they have a chance to play pro ball. So the foreign thing is really the invading, professional baseball. So it's part of the problem is we as coaches we had to take bilingual class. We had to be bilingual, which means we had to speak Spanish, right? Because most of our players, so like half of them are going to be, from either the Dominican Republic or Venezuela. So it's hard when and it takes longer to actually get the message across. But that's been one of the problems. I'm getting off the thing, but the whole thing is about the Japanese American thing or Asian American. There are more guys playing, which is good, and it's being accepted, and that's a good thing too. So proud of that fact. It's good to turn on TV and see like Juan play, in Cleveland, and his abilities, and there's guys like Connor Wong and all these kind of guys playing. I don't know where they came from, but they're interesting that that's more present today than ever before, and it's good for the game. Don't get me wrong. It's just that eventually what's going to happen is we're going to be the minority, Americans. So
I have a follow-up question on that too. You spoke earlier on in our conversation about how you saw yourself as a baseball player first and not kind of a cultural ambassador. But do you think that the current climate of Major League Baseball has forced foreign players to act more as ambassadors of kind of their culture than as baseball players? And do you think that's changed their or our outlook on the game at all?
Well, I think it's an opportunity to be that because you're always in the public eye. I think sometimes what our kids see is the wrong impression or wrong image of, like when they came out, ESPN came out and let the kids play. So that, that to them was like entertainment to the fans to act like whatever, like the Savannah Bananas or whatever on the field, right? And that to me is disrespectful of the game and disrespectful of your culture because people just think of you as just a punk, instead of a professional. So, getting back to my case, I didn't want, and we were told growing up that you should not embarrass your family or your race because, they already don't like you. But today it's like do what you want, and I think that's what's being misrepresented is the fact that you have opportunity. So don't be, as we used to call it when I played, a hot dog, where they got to put mustard on you, like stuff. You got to be a representative of your profession, and of course it's who you are too, right? Because they stereotype, just like they stereotype me, Ryan. So we wanted to represent. That's part of it, is not to have people think negative things about who you are and kind of what you are. And that's kind of my answer.
Do you think that the growing presence of Asian and Asian American players in the big leagues is changing that stereotype, or it's removing some of that negative stereotypes towards Asians? I mean, in addition to some of the players you mentioned, I mean, you have Lars Nootbaar, Keston Hiura, and there are, top-rate kind of Japanese players, Yamamoto, Imanaga, Ohtani. It seems like these are very extremely athletic and talented athletes that seem to be really maybe changing the image of Asian American, men, Asians in general.
Yeah, I think it's part of the times. I know, when I was growing up, nobody even knew what sushi was, And then when you mentioned that the fact there was raw fish on it and all that, people would go, "What are you, crude?" And it's like that tastes like crap. Like now, it's cool to like most of the players now have eaten Asian food, like in all different areas, not just Japanese food, right? They've gone into Chinese and Korean and all that. And so the global thing has become, it's much broader and much more sophisticated, like to be, knowing what those foods are, right? For any ethnicity. I think that part has helped because now, there's more, they're not as ignorant about us, if you will, like, So that's helped. I think that truly has helped, that there isn't as much critical, discriminative things about each race. So, and the fact that more kids are playing baseball, Asian Americans. So it's good. It's making it better for everybody, I think. And the fact that it is becoming global is a part of, the world getting to know each other. That's what the Olympics were meant to do. And baseball serves that purpose too, because it goes into countries that, most people would never go to. I know, like, when I played winter ball, I was able to play in Mexico, which is very tough, very crude country at that time. Maybe still is. Dominican Republic, which is worse, and Venezuela, and I've been to Puerto Rico. So I went at that time. I went to almost every country. I went to Nicaragua to play too, exhibition games. So I seen what it's like out there. It's we got it made as Americans, believe me.
The last question from me is I need to ask you about Ohtani. What do you think about him?
Oh, he's fantastic. I mean, to be able to do what he's done, both pitching and hitting hasn't been done since Babe Ruth. So, we're trying to find that kind of player, but you're not going to find something like that very often. I mean, what he's done is kind of like what Bo Jackson did, or even Deion Sanders, or that other guy that played for the Cardinals. Played two sports, and be good enough to be a starter in both sports. So, so Tani is a once in a lifetime guy, just like Ichiro is a once in a lifetime guy. So Japanese baseball does produce that kind of player, which is why we go global and looking for talent. But to answer the question, he's great. There's no any other word I can use. Great.
Well, wanted to really thank you, Mr. Sakata, for your time. This has been amazing. So thank you so much for that too.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure. Glad I was able to participate.